Hey everyone, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're breaking down the massive financial risks hidden inside global trade. Specifically, we're talking about air freight logistics and customs valuation. You know, if you're moving goods across borders, there is a whole lot more at stake than just getting a box from point A to point B. We're looking at the absolutely critical and honestly often misunderstood intersection of the International Chamber of Commerce's rules, the on-the-ground reality of air cargo, and the strict legal requirements of the World Trade Organization. Just look at the sheer disparity here. Air freight accounts for less than 1% of global cargo by weight. But get this, it carries a staggering 35% of the world's trade value. That's huge. We're talking about highly sensitive, incredibly valuable goods, things like perishables, life-saving pharmaceuticals, precision instruments, and high-end electronics where speed is absolutely paramount.
Now, with cargo that valuable, we really have to ask the critical question: who actually holds the bag if something drops or gets damaged at the airport? Imagine a pallet of vital pharmaceuticals is ruined because of a temperature failure sitting on the tarmac. Who is financially responsible? Well, the answer isn't always obvious, and assuming you just know, without checking the exact contract terms, is exactly how multi-million-dollar supply chain disasters happen. So, to avoid those costly supply chain mistakes, we're going to follow the cargo's journey through 5 quick steps today. 1. The universal trade language. 2. Air freight's unique rules. 3. The airway bill difference. 4. Calculating customs valuation. And finally, 5. Avoiding hidden trade risks.
All right, step 1, the universal trade language.
Okay, so here is a massive misconception. Incoterms dictate who pays for transport and exactly where the risk transfers, but they do not establish when ownership changes hands. They aren't some universal body of law. They're simply an internationally agreed upon protocol. If you want to specify when the actual title to the goods transfers from the seller over to the buyer, well, that has to live entirely separately inside your commercial contract. Moving right along to step 2, air freight's unique rules. So Incoterms are actually divided into 2 distinct families. There are 7 any modes terms, which work perfectly for air freight, and 4 C-only terms. When buyers and sellers start speaking different dialects, like using C terms for an air shipment, expensive accidents happen. It's like putting diesel in a gas car. For the sky, you absolutely must use the 7 any mode terms, no exceptions. Let's take FOB, or free on board, for example. People misuse this literally all the time for air freight. The problem? FOB technically requires goods to be placed over a ship's rail. And, well, the last time I checked, a Boeing 747 doesn't have a ship's rail, or a seaport, right? If something goes wrong, the legal ambiguity of using a C term for an airplane can completely invalidate your risk protection. So what should you use instead? For air freight, FCA, or free carrier, is usually the cleanest starting point if the buyer controls the freight. Risk transfers the exact moment the goods are handed over to the carrier at the origin. Now, on the flip side, if the seller is controlling the freight, CIP, carriage and insurance paid to, is the most comprehensive option. Why? Because CIP mandates that the seller provides Institute Cargo Clause's all risks insurance at 110% of the contract value. That extra 10%, that's specifically designed to cover your expected profit and just the sheer hassle of dealing with a claim. It completely replaces the old CIF-C term with a standard that accurately protects your business interests up in the air. We also need to be hyper-specific about the named place in these contracts. Let's say you're using the term DAP, delivered at place. You have to clearly state if the delivery ends at the destination airport cargo facility or at the buyer's premises, because that inland delivery leg from the airport to a distant warehouse can be incredibly expensive. If the contract simply says DAP London and the buyer is actually located hours away from Heathrow, a massive dispute over who pays for that trucking leg is practically inevitable. Okay, on to step 3, the airway bill difference. Now, this is a massive conceptual shift, and honestly, a huge trap for the unwary. In sea freight, a bill of lading is an actual document of title. Holding the physical original paper means you own the goods. But in air freight, an airway bill is non-negotiable and is absolutely not a document of title. It really just confirms the airline accepted the goods. The buyer doesn't even need to present an original airway bill to collect their stuff at the destination airport. The airline just releases the cargo to whoever is named as the consignee. And because the bank cannot control the shipment using a standard document of title, managing payment risk via a letter of credit in air freight requires a totally different financial structure. Think about it. If a bank expects to hold the goods as collateral until payment is made, just like they do with a sea freight bill of lading, they are in for a very rude awakening when the airline just hands the goods directly to the buyer. Which brings us to step 4, calculating customs valuation. Research shows a pretty fascinating intersection here. The ICC creates the trade rules, but the World Trade Organization dictates how governments collect their revenue. These two entirely different systems have to talk to each other perfectly on your commercial invoice. When your goods hit the border, customs officials look straight to the World Trade Organization's Transaction Value Method 1. This method relies on the actual trade agreement to determine your tax base. It looks at the price actually paid or payable. But you might be wondering, what exactly is included in that price? Well, that entirely depends on which Incoterm you negotiated. And here is the catch. A basic ex-factory price stacks with other costs to build the final number that customs will tax. Ex-works is really just the naked cost of the goods, but if your seller pays for pre-carriage, the flight itself, or insurance, customs wants a piece of that action too. Your dutiable value often includes all of those stacked costs rolled into one. Now, if you misrepresent your Incoterm on a customs declaration, the penalties are severe. In places like the Philippines, for instance, treating a simple paperwork mistake as technical smuggling can lead to massive fines, crazy surcharges, or even the outright seizure of your cargo. You literally cannot afford to get this wrong. Finally, step 5, avoiding hidden trade risks. It is so vital to clarify your terminology within your own organization and with your customs broker. A naked ex-factory price, which is just the cost of making the item, is drastically different from the final fully burdened dutiable value that includes shipping, insurance, and terminal charges. Failing to account for this difference causes massive trade distortion and leaves you paying the totally wrong amount of tax, which basically invites brutal audits. Industry experts point out a really harsh reality here. Quote, "There are undocumented sources of financial and operational risk that are fundamentally internal to each organization." End quote. Your biggest hidden risks aren't plane delays or bad weather. Often, it's something totally internal, like your sales team quoting a C term for an air shipment, or your finance department misunderstanding an airway bill. I want to leave you with this final thought so you can audit your own practices. Look at your invoices. Look at your contracts. Are you actually speaking the right universal trade language to truly protect your business? If you're shipping by air, are you using the Incoterms? Do you know exactly where your risk transfers? Understanding these frameworks isn't just some boring logistics exercise. It's the absolute foundation of global commercial resilience. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I highly encourage you to go review your own supply chain documentation today.